Hey guys, we're back.
Hey everybody.
Another episode, talking more crap.
What number are we on now?
It's like 15 or 16 or something. We'll see in a minute when the slideshow thing will tell me because my memory is Swiss cheese.
Yeah. And they didn't even think we'd make it past episode 1. Those
No,
naysayers.
the studio didn't believe in us. They wanted us to go back and re-edit our 10 hours of footage and try and get a cut that would work in the cinema for the audience and cram more sessions in per day to make some dollars. And we said, no, we want a 10-hour epic film.
Yeah. Despite cold reviews in the LA Times initially, we have now been finally accepted by the audience. And like we've
Except for
said,
Pauline
Dave.
Kael, he still hates my guts.
Look, as long as the network are happy though, that's the main thing. As always,
Yeah,
we serve our network masters. Don't
that's
cancel
true.
our show, please.
I've got one calling from home. He seems to enjoy the show, and he's just got a quick question for us.
Now, what is it you want? In your depths of your ignorance, what is it you want?
That's one of our fans. He likes to stop in and say hello.
What do we want?
Well, we want to talk about some films, I think. So,
Yeah.
episode 16, The Deer Hunter.
Deer Hunter. And we're on a little bit of a departure from, I suppose, the type of material we've been speaking about up until now on this show. This won't quite be as light-hearted and rollicking a ride as Street
It will
Fighter,
not be a long
the
show,
live-action
Mark.
movie. Yeah, yeah, we're probably not going to be getting the same lulls as we were watching,
No,
Kylie Minogue strangling men with her thighs in Street Fighter.
no. That's why I had my
But
one
still,
gag at the start, and that's out of the way. That was my quota.
oh, don't worry. I'm sure I'll still find a way to make some form of inappropriate humor slip in
Mm-hmm.
this show today. But look, it's I mentioned briefly before we went on air. It was something that was kind of uh, niggling in my mind recently. This movie. It's a movie I've watched many times. I've actually nearly been watching it since I was a little kid. I saw it at an age that was probably way too young to see something like this for the first time, but it's something that stuck with me all these years. There's a lot of kind of heavy themes and material to be kind of covered in it. So, like I said, it is a little bit of a departure from what we've spoken about previously. But you
Yeah.
know, indulge me, folks. We're not going to do stuff like this every week, but maybe once in a while we will tackle something a little bit more earthy and not as sci-fi-ish or fantasy-ish or whatever
Yeah.
wrestling and all that other wacky stuff we like to talk about. So
I can talk about
something a
good
little bit
drama
more gritty.
films all days, but it's good to sort of space them out so we don't get too depressed because some films are very serious and depressing, but certainly
Oh
worth
yeah,
watching.
yes. Well, last week, or maybe it was even the week before last, when we did our live action Street Fighter movie talk.
Yeah.
Like I had actually gotten up early, and before I went on the recording with you, I actually watched that movie. I
And then
would
you watch
not
Body
go
in
and
the
do the
Street
same
afterwards.
thing. Yeah, I wouldn't go and do that with the Deer Hunter. No way you'd be getting up and watching this first thing in the morning because it's three
No.
hours long for starters.
Yep.
So, and
If you're
yeah,
going to watch old
you're
movies at dawn, watch like a Kurosawa or watch a John Wayne Cowboy. I can watch that
yeah,
first thing in the morning, but other stuff.
nice John Wayne Western to bring a bit of sunlight into your life
Mm.
early in the morning. But yeah, it's there. It was in my mind. I'd heard a piece of the soundtrack. It kind of come up on my random YouTube kind of music playlist, and it got me back thinking about the movie and what happens in it, and just the general kind of themes and whatnot associated with it, because it's one of those things when you grow up watching something and you kind of know context for the meaning behind a lot of what you're watching. Because look, I'm a 30-something-year-old Irish lad. I never was in the American military. I never fought in any wars. I'm not a Vietnam veteran. I have absolutely zero link to this conflict in any way, shape, or form. However, I am a lad who comes from, a relatively small town that was kind of maybe built around one particular industry, and there's a lot of kind of real world stuff that's in this movie, just a kind of around outside of what happens during the Vietnam stuff, but just what happens in these guys' hometown that kind of reminds me of just kind of the real world and real life and just day to day,
very working class.
what you do. Work, just like a kind of a working class kind of, just a real life vibe from this movie. Because one thing, and we'll not get too much into it now before we even get into the whole plot and everything, but the overall look of this movie is one of just pure realism. Like even the still shot you have here of the guys walking up the hill, you see the town in the background, the steel mill, smoke pumping away. It's very, like, I'm looking out the window right now, and that same grey sky is is like at me. Like this could be somewhere in Ireland,
Where I grew up in New Zealand, it was grey sky like that. So. And it's all real locations. This too. So like the still shot there, that's an actual town and an actual steel mill were one of the locations they used. I'll just read a quick thing telling us kind of the setting and the cast, and then we'll get into it a bit more. The Deer Hunter is a 1978 war drama film co-written and directed by Michael Cimino about a trio of Slavic-American steelworkers whose lives are upended after fighting in the Vietnam War. Three soldiers are played by Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, John Savage, with John Cazale in his final role as he was dying of cancer at the time. Meryl Streep, who's only in the film to be with John Cazale because she was there to support him, otherwise wasn't going to be involved with the film. And George Dzundza playing supporting roles. The story takes place in Clairton, Pennsylvania, a working class town, and I'll murder this name here, town on the Monongahela River south of Pittsburgh and in Vietnam. And the location shoots, they used Thailand, stood in for parts for the Vietnam era locations, and it filmed in several American small towns, the total of 8 different towns in 4 states, being West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Washington. But yeah, we'll get into the actual beginning of the film here.
Yeah, the pretty early on, as soon as the initial opening credits have finished rolling, that whole location shooting really just it's in your face immediately. Like I was saying, it's so real that just from the opening shots, you're shown this town, this Pennsylvanian town that's all kind of built around the steel mill industry, and everything is just so gritty, drab, kind of grey and beige, but it's just so real. It's just so real. It just sucks you in straight away to this environment. Like at no time when you're kind of watching this are you ever kind of thinking I'm just looking at a bunch of actors walking across a set. And you can say that about any part of this movie, whether it's the scenes that were shot for the town story bits or the ones that are showing Vietnam. Every location in this movie is real, even if it's not actually the real place that they shot the stuff in. They've went and found locations that are as close to the real thing as you can get, and it really shows right from the get-go here. But even the entire the whole color tone, like I mentioned, everything, there's a real kind of drab kind of gray look to everything. It's almost like they kind
One
of
of those Silent Hill
desaturated.
towns.
Yeah, but it's like there's a real washed out look, I think is the word
Mm.
I'm trying to look for. It's like there's not much color saturation in anything you see here. Like even right slap dang center here, we have a shot from inside the church. Even with the kind of red carpet and everything, there's no vibrancy in that
Mm.
shot. There's no pop of color or anything, and I think it's just it adds to it. I just think it adds because look, that is what the real world for a lot of us is. It's not this kind of vibrant technicolor landscape. This is kind of the type of environment you live in day to day, or at least it felt like that for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people who watch this movie. What do you think of the whole look and feel here?
Oh, I'd agree with you 100%. And it is like, I grew up in the south of New Zealand. We get constant grey sky, and even if things are bright and green and colourful, the light coming down, real light is making it grayer and dimmer, and that's the effect they kind of go for in the film. Probably the most vibrant colours you see are some of the nature scenes or the sky in the background, or when they go into the mountains later in the film. So yeah, you get the sense, it's very working class, and it's kind of dim, that overcast, dimly lit sort of look. I mean, you can see everything in frame. It's shot in a beautiful, nice widescreen format, so you can see all the details. But as you said, it's a desaturated color palette, and I think it works very well. It works very well with the style and themes of the film too.
Yeah. So in these opening moments, what we're essentially being shown, we're being introduced to the main characters that we're going to be following on the story, and it's these three guys. It's Mike, Nick, and I believe is this John. I could be getting that wrong. Stevie, sorry, Stevie is the third guy who's the of the trio. So these three friends, they all work together in a steel mill, tight knit community. Them and their buddies, they just hang out all the time, go drinking, go deer hunting in the mountains. Everybody's really close. But the three guys, Mike, Nick, and Stevie, they're going to be shipping out to Vietnam shortly. So this kind of whole social circle they're involved in, it's going to be broken up and split apart. So as we're introduced to the main characters here, they're essentially just finishing up their last shift of work in the steel mill, and finishing up for the day, and in the case of the three guys, finishing up for the foreseeable future because they're going to be heading off to Vietnam soon. We also learned that Stevie is going to be getting married, which obviously is a massive deal, and he's going to be getting married before heading off the war, which is kind of a bit of a cliche in some war movie stories.
Yeah.
We've probably heard this old chestnut before, but one thing this movie definitely pulls off is getting you really invested in the kind of human relationships that everybody has with each other, and by the time we kind of get the whole wedding scene and everything that's happening there, you really feel like you've gone through the process of experiencing almost like a real life event with the whole wedding prior to the three guys setting off the war. And we see here in this middle shot where they're in the church, where we're briefly introduced to Stevie's mother, who's kind of crying and complaining to the local priest that she doesn't understand why her son wants to marry this floozy girl he's only met recently, and she's not sure. She doesn't trust his new wife to be. She remarks to the priestess, she's not that thin, if you get my drift, implying that she's already pregnant, despite the fact that they've not yet been married, which is something she clearly frowns upon. Obviously that she's quite religious and takes that type of thing seriously. So we see already there's already a little bit of drama unfolding in the background of this wedding that people are preparing for. We also get a nice little taste here of the kind of bravado and maybe kind of general mindset of the characters. We have them in this beautiful white Cadillac. They're all driving off to the pub after their long shift at work, and they go to overtake this truck, and they just barely manage to overtake it without getting like crushed into that wall that they're driving alongside, while also avoiding, oncoming traffic coming from the other side.
And
So
they didn't have to
we're kind of
overtake it. His mate's like, pass
it,
him on the inside, and like basically dares him to do it.
exactly. So there's a real kind of laddish kind of boys will be
Mm.
boys kind of playful mentality going on here. Not afraid to take risks, and yeah, you definitely get a real sense of that kind of camaraderie and bravado that the group kind of operates on. They're just as we like to say over here, they're just a great bunch of lads, and they're having a great time,
Yeah, watching that scene again this week where they passed that truck was scary, man. Because I'm looking at it and going, I didn't really need to do it, and it's quite dangerous. And I was like, man, I wouldn't do that. And I thought about it. I've literally done that twice just this week going to work. Because the roads here are terrible and traffic's constant congestion and having to weave in out of lanes all the time at speed. And it's, oh man, and I wish I didn't have to. I wish the roads are empty and I could just drive in a line to and from work, no nonsense. I really like the opening too, where the shift is changing over. The fresh crew is coming on for the steel mill, and our characters of the crew have just finished their shift and they're heading out. So people are walking in as well as coming out at the same time. And you see them all changing in the showers, and there's like long tracking shot. You see like change room showers. Guys are like slapping him and going, "Hey, yeah, off you go," because they know he's leaving. And but you get the sense they're a tight knit bunch of good mates who, they work together, they drink together. I assume their wives know each other, or probably gossip or have friendships as well outside of the mates friendships. But it's very true to life, and like anyone's ever worked in a factory where it's any kind of factory that's messy or you got to change clothes. I mean, steel mills are incredibly dangerous as well. It's very salt of the earth and true to life, the way they film it and the way they show it, kind of like reminds me of like the police procedural shows where they would show behind the scenes in the background how they're just following the characters around almost in real time. It was great opening.
Phenomenal. Yeah, it's such a product of its time, this movie. And I know we were briefly chatting off air just about other these kind of movies from this era. They all just have a beautiful look to them for a variety of reasons. I'm not saying they're all kind of carbon copy clones the way they were shot, but there is definitely a noticeable look to movies from this time before we get deep into the
location
80s
shooting
and
was far
90s.
more common.
Yes. And it makes a difference. I think it makes a difference, getting you or enabling you to be immersed into this world that they're trying to show you. And even there, you were mentioning about the steel mill and the exchanges between them and their work colleagues as they're kind of clocking off. It's all kind of very, it's just realistic dialogue. There's not loads of kind of explanatory kind of plot driven dialogue that seems kind of superfluous. Everything is all very kind of real and grounded, and their mates are still laughing and joking around with them and talking about like the usual bullshit that you'd expect guys to be talking about after work, what they're going to be doing that
we
night,
see that they're
any women they're
all
seeing.
flawed characters as well.
Exactly. And
Like
it's
real people. Yeah.
real people, very natural. It only takes them less than a couple of minutes to establish to you as the audience that this group of guys are really tight knit, and you could believe that they've literally been friends probably most of their lives. Probably went to school in that town together, like probably grew up, all came up, and then all got a job working in the steel mill after school.
Like I've lived in cities a few times in my life, and I've lived in the country a few years as well. Not as much, but the times I have lived in small country towns, I've lived in some really tiny ones, and most of the people here all knew each other, and all the town gossip and who went to school and where, you know.
Yeah, it's just that that kind of small town mentality, a local town for local people.
Yeah.
Here we see the preparations for the wedding that's going to be happening shortly between Stevie and Angela. This is like, as someone who is I've a sister who got married a few years ago. I remember, and I've been, being married myself and been to quite a few weddings and seeing the kind of both the kind of stress, the pressure, the agonizing behind the scenes stuff that goes along with making a wedding work. When you watch this stuff, it's like, once again, this is so
Dragging the
realistic.
drunk groom there.
Yeah, and but even just those frantic preparations of, getting dresses ready, making sure the cake
Yeah.
is done, getting, you even see when they're setting up in this kind of hallway, there's like a guy like, oh no, that picture is like 6 inches too high, move it down. All this little minute detail of people who are just like, trying to pull off this big event. And yes, of course, Stevie's mother has to go drag him out of the pub because he's in the middle of getting completely sloshed with his mates after their last day of work. Um, this pub, or this bar, I should say, you mentioned to me before we started recording, that was actually the bar was purpose built just for
For the film.
the scenes, which is interesting. And though it was actually then used as an actual bar afterwards. Is that right?
Yeah, after the film was finished, they kept it as a real bar and actually functioned for several years, apparently, which is pretty cool. It's much better use than instead of trashing everything Hollywood style or throwing it in the dumpster when the film's done.
So in a way, like, I nearly wouldn't even
It's the
count
only
that
set
then
then.
as a set.
So it's sort of
Yeah,
that.
well, do you
But it's
see, is
real.
it a set though, Johnny? Yeah, because it's real.
No, because they built
Exactly,
it.
exactly. Yeah, just
So
it's another
it wasn't
grey
all a back
area there.
plot. It was in the town, and it stayed in the town, and it was a real bar after. So I don't know, it was a set, or they were carpenters. So. But I love that they
Well, as a
actually kept that functioning bar.
oh, that's brilliant. I just thought that was an excellent piece of trivia. But it's another one of those real life things as well, where these bars, these pubs, they often are the focal point for small
Yeah,
communities
yeah.
to socialize, and they really nail that vibe in this movie. You just get that feeling. It's like, it's one of those towns, everybody knows each other. We all drink in the same place. Uh, you know, it's the type of thing as well, from what I understand, like a steel mill like that, it's probably running like 24 hours a day. So this bar is probably open 24 hours a day as well. You've got different shift workers coming in, going out, coming at all times during the day. And it's the main kind of social watering hole, essentially,
Yeah.
for everybody to converge and meet up. And I just think they really kind of nail it in this movie. It is, from any of the scenes you ever see in the bar, there's like music playing in the background, and they don't even try to like dub the sound so you can hear the actors' dialogue better. They keep it at the same volume, so it almost feels like you're there in a real bar drinking with these guys, where you almost have to kind of cup your ear a little bit to hear what the conversation is, because the music playing in the bar is so loud, and all the kind of ambient noise from the bar is so loud. But once again, it adds to the realism and the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I do like country town bars and pubs are very different than city ones, because city ones are often filled by people kind of passing through or tourists and whoever. Country ones are locals, people who know each other coming from work, and especially for the men coming from a dangerous, stressful job like a steel mill, having somewhere to go other than home in between to the bar and then transition to home. That's like, although it's a place people become alcoholics, it's a healthy thing for me, rather than going home and potentially, like, taking out your day's aggression and punching up your wife and stuff like that. They go to a place where men can be men and roughhouse and talk shit, and then get to wind down from that job and then go home. And it's a very different thing than like city sort of pubs and clubs and that.
Yeah. The problem with these type of situations, though, as kind of often unfolds in my country, unfortunately, is that you have
Yeah,
with the wife coming down to the pub on a Friday evening,
yeah,
pulling out the husband because he's been going to the pub every evening after work and has pissed all the money away.
yeah.
So,
It's a fine
but no,
line
like,
between
and
what's useful and,
yeah, there's
and
yeah, and
interrupting.
I shouldn't really chuckle about it because obviously there's people who struggle with that type of
Mm,
thing, and it's not something to make light of. But I suppose, look, we all kind of know that reality of what it can be as well. So it kind of it needs to be mentioned, I suppose. But yeah, we see Stevie's mother. She drags him out of the bar to get him ready, and then we get a little bit of dialogue between Mike and Nick. They've got all their wedding gear on. They've got their tuxes ready to go, but they're just having a little chat about potentially going deer hunting after the wedding because it's going to be their last chance to go up the mountain and hunt a couple of
yeah.
bucks before they set off to Vietnam. And we do just kind of get a nice little moment where you can tell that Nick, who's played by Christopher Walken, the whole situation with going to war seems to be a little bit more on his mind than it is with Mike, who's played by Robert De Niro. Like Mike is more just thinking about, okay, let's get this kind of wedding over with, and then we'll get in one last hunt. Whereas Nick, you can tell it's kind of weighing on his mind that they're about to embark on something that's going to be fairly life changing, and we just get a
Hmm.
nice little moment between the two and talking about, how it's the right way to hunt is if you're going to kill the deer, you got to shoot him in one shot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what Mike says. One shot, anything less than one or anything more than one is pussy. If you're going to make a kill, it has to be in one shot. And Nick tells him, what he likes about the hunt is essentially just being up alone in the mountains and hearing the wind move through the trees. And it's just a nice moment between two friends and another, I suppose, way of emphasizing to us, the viewing audience, just how close this particular group of friends are. Like they clearly spend like all their or most of their free time together, and it's going to be a big change in their lives that's approaching, and you've got so much going on because apart from the whole, well, there's the three guys heading off the war, you have all the extra shenanigans of a wedding going on in the background,
Yeah.
which is like, real, there's a lot of stuff. There's just a lot of big life changing kind of moments all happening at the one time. So it's nice to kind of get this moment of kind of quiet time almost between two of the main characters where they just kind of chat about how they feel about what's going on.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. So it leads
Yeah.
into the next still here. I've got a nice shot, which our heads are covering the bottom left, but here it is here. Nice interior shot of this, was it Russian Orthodox church? Very spectacular building. Looks like, reminds me of a very Renaissance sort of era of the lots of decorations and stained glass windows and beautiful, beautiful building. And they used a real building, of course, for this. They didn't build it's an actual church they used in the film.
Yeah. It is beautiful, beautiful architecture. And yeah, just now obviously we're not into the whole whatever. I suppose it's some type of Slavic Orthodox Christian. I'm
Yeah,
not I'm not
yeah,
100% sure what the religion is that they follow in this, but the inside of this church is quite reminiscent of what you'd see in a lot of the Catholic churches
yeah,
over
yeah,
here.
pretty much.
Just that kind of grand stained glass windows, that kind of beautiful architecture. There's just a real kind of feeling almost of wealth and grandeur to the building. Though once again, it goes without saying, they still manage to shoot it and desaturate it in such a way that you're probably not seeing all the color that this interior could offer if you were
No, if
to
you went to a
actually
real
walk
one, there'll
in
be a
there.
lot of natural light coming in. There'll be so much will kind of blind you in the middle of the day, I would think.
Very impressive, though. Very impressive.
Yeah. But yeah, that was just a nice one I had to pick out and chuck in there and blow up. So we're on to the next part here. We go into the actual like wedding festivities, and also the guys meet the guy from Vietnam at the bar as well.
That's right. That's right. So first of all, there's a few things going on here. By the way, maybe I should just take a moment to say, like I mentioned at the beginning, I watched this movie for the first time when I was very young, and probably far too young to really be witnessing, especially what we'll get to later on when it comes to some of the more shocking scenes in the movie. But one thing, you know, when you're a kid and there's a 3-hour movie playing in the background, you're not really paying attention to a lot of stuff. Like, I will admit, like, I was mostly unimpressed as a youngster with the whole wedding setup. Like, I didn't even know what this movie was about. I just thought it was just this weird. I thought it was going to be like a romance or something. I really didn't know what this was when I was watching it as a kid for the first time. I just like, it just didn't interest me that much. It wasn't until we actually get to the war parts that my interest really kind of peaked, and I started really paying attention. But going back to what we're talking about here, as an adult, I can totally once again appreciate, because we've had the preamble and the preparation for the wedding, and then the wedding ceremony itself. But now we're in the aftermath, the after parties. And another thing I've gone through multiple times in life from attending various weddings, where everybody just gets totally shit-faced drunk and is just having a great time, having a laugh. There's some real wacky moments in this scene, like where, like, John Cazale just sees his missus you know, dancing with another man, so he walks over and like knocks her out, and you know, there's like fights happening, and it's that weird kind of chaotic, you know, there's like a million and one things happening you know, in this big kind of dance hall, and you're kind of getting little snippets of it all. And one interesting moment in this is you know, the guys, they're getting totally sloshed. They go out to the back bar, and there's a man in full military green beret uniform sitting drinking alone at the bar. And the guys are like, "Oh, you know, Green Beret," and trying to cheer him, and like, you know, "Hey, barman, get this guy a drink," and like trying to get him to talk to them, and like, you know, and he's just totally ignoring them. He won't even
Yeah,
look up in their general direction. And you know, the guys
he
are
looks
drunk, so
shell
they're
shocked.
starting to get, yeah, he you know, the guys get a little bit offended that he's not interacting with them, so they get up kind of close, and the guy does give them a look eventually and begrudgingly shakes their hand. And the lad starts saying, "Well, you know, like, we're going to Vietnam, you know, we're heading out, you know, in a few days' time, you know." And they ask him, you know, "What's it like over there?" And he just takes a shot and he says, "Fuck it." And then the guys are like, "Well, what does that mean? You know, like, we're asking you what it's like. What's it like? Tell
Yeah,
us what Vietnam is." And he just says again,
he's
"Fuck it,"
telling you.
and takes another shot, like, you know. And that's all he has to say. That's the only bit of words they get out of him. So that's
Mhm.
maybe
And
a
then they
little
parrot it back to him.
precursor.
They're like, "Yeah, yeah, fuck it," and they start having
Yeah,
more
fuck it.
shots.
Yeah, exactly.
They have
Yeah,
no idea
exactly.
what it
There.
means or what they're in for.
Yes, yeah. But this guy, this Green Beret guy, you'll never see him again in the movie. But even just the moment he's on screen, it's quite memorable. He just looks like a hardened soul. Like
Mm.
he's been through some serious shit.
Yep.
Like even that look he gives them when he looks up for the first time, you almost think, "Shit, is this guy going to like kick the shit out of these three guys?" Because he just looks like
Mm.
somebody who has literally seen it all. You know, he's seen some serious shit, and he doesn't want to talk to three drunk fucking arseholes at a wedding who he's, you know, he
No.
probably just stumbled across this on his way going someplace else, and now he's being accosted by these three drunkards who want to talk a load of shit and act really, you know, act all macho and cool around him. But he's just like,
Mm.
"No, fuck it, fuck it." You know?
And he and I don't know, because it's one of those things that's kind of left up to the viewer, but he might also be reminded of his life before he went to Vietnam, seeing these guys, you know, seeing, like, you know, life was a bit more innocent.
Yeah,
But before we
and
get further on there's a scene where we have the wedding couple drinking from the two-pronged cup thing there, and this bit with the car and the guy streaking and running down the road. The way this is shot, I don't know, but I have a feeling that they parroted this in Old School with Will Ferrell. He's in like the white underwear, and he goes, "We're streaking," and it trails him along quite a bit. And I just wondered if they actually got it from this, because the way it's shot is very similar. But yeah, they
might
follow him
have.
down the hill.
Yeah, no, they very well might have. And you mentioned there briefly about them drinking from that kind of shared cup. They drink the wine during the ceremony.
Mhm.
From what I understand, and bear in mind, I'm very, very limited knowledge of what the actual ins and outs of the religion is, but apparently, as part of this tradition, when the couple both drink at the same time, if a single drop is spilt, it's supposed to mean bad luck within
Yeah,
this
they
tradition.
say in the
And
scenes like don't spill it. Like,
that's right. And you do see briefly a drop spill from Angela's side of the cup and
ah,
land on her dress. So there is maybe a little bit of foreboding there. So
mm,
between that kind of the green beret guy encounter at the bar and that little drop of wine, spilling on her dress, you are kind of maybe getting a couple of hints that things are about to take a turn for the worst and for a lot of these
yeah,
people.
definitely. Go on to the next one, and that's the end of these guys streaking. After that, we leads into them going up into the mountains to hunt the deer.
Yeah, even that whole streaking scene, man. It's such a. I'm not saying I've done that exactly, but I've definitely ran wild, drunk, and like ran down streets at night with people
I
chasing me when
reckon,
I'm
like
drunk. I'm
in the
sure.
scene, there's no way the guy was drunk, because he ran so far in that scene. Like, if you were actually drunk, you would have been really fucking up or passing,
Yeah.
because he runs really far.
But so the guys they decide. So look, Stevie's married now anyway. He's going to be going and spending some time with the new wife. But the rest of the lads, they're going to try and get in one last deer hunt before they set off. So they all load up into the car and go for a spin to their usual spot up the mountains. And we get a lot of nice kind of exchanges between the group here as well on their way to the hunting spot. Just how they kind of fuck around with each other and BS with each other. They're like throwing cans at each other. There's this moment where they stop to go take a piss, and then they go and drive off and leave one of the guys behind and keep fucking with him, reversing the car back. He goes to get in the door, they drive off again. Just kind of real, like, boys being boys and drunken idiots. Of course, back in the 70s, it was totally acceptable to drink drive your way up a mountain
Yeah.
with a load of guns. It's like all these guys in a car, totally drunk with loads of guns. And I'm sure if a cop stopped them, he just waved them on because that
They'd
was
probably
just the
have a
way.
beer. The cop would have a beer and be like, "See, have a good wedding. Catch you later."
But we get some interesting insight into the character of Mike. We kind of learned that he's a pretty no nonsense guy because
Mhm.
Stanley, one of the guys, he's forgotten to take his hunting boots with him. So he asks Mike if he could borrow his, and Mike's just totally unimpressed, and he tells him, "No, you can't borrow my hunting boots because we go hunting all the time, and you always forget something. You always either forget your jacket, forget your gun, forget your boots, and I'm sick of always looking after you. And
Mhm.
when I'm going to be gone, there's going to be nobody here to help you out with this type of thing. You're just going to have to look after yourself and remember to do these things." And we got a little bit of a back and forth with the guys, kind of giving him shit for not just loaning Stanley the boots, and why is he making such a big deal out of nothing? But you do kind of it's definitely a good moment to kind of see that maybe Mike takes things a little bit more seriously than you might have initially thought, and that he's
Yeah.
possibly a bit more of a deep thinker when it comes to certain things than the rest of the guys who are kind of maybe more interested in just having fun and having a good time. And kind of just going from day to day doing that. We also then get to see during this whole scene when they actually do get up the mountain, we do see Mike in action, and he is quite the formidable hunter. He takes out the deer, and he takes, just like he said he would. He does it in one shot. Look, I have to say, I suppose, full disclosure, like I'm not into hunting or shooting animals or anything like that. It's not something I'd want to partake in. I'm just kind of, that's just the way I am. Like I just wouldn't be something I'd really like to do, but I can still respect the skill involved, and also the mindset if it is something that you're going to do. At least if you are going to end the life of one of these beautiful creatures, it's going to be quick. There's not going to be a struggle. It's going to be done in one, as they say, one shot, and he gets his mark. And the lads end up then driving home with a deer on the
Yeah,
bonnet of the car.
like I'm not going to be sitting up in a bivouac anytime soon, Joe Rogan style, trying to fire a bow and arrow at a bear or deer or anything else. So it's not my sort of thing. And
No,
I'm not.
same here.
It still makes me squeamish watching any kind of animal violence on cinema, because before the 1970s they used a lot of real animals on cinema, and there's a whole history of circuses and animal abuse and stuff going back. But fortunately, this film, they did not kill that deer. I read in the production notes they did actually shoot it with a tranquilizer, not from De Niro's gun, but obviously up close. That's why it squirms around. It's actually just a tranquilizer. So the deer did live. So that's the good part of this scene. But yeah, I understand hunting though for like food, and historically, if you lived in the West and everything, you needed to feed your family, But otherwise, I don't want to go
Yes,
around shooting things. Okay, so we go on to the
exactly,
next
exactly.
one. Yeah, great shot here. This is the same scene here when the up the mountain, but just seeing that background on that road, man, just absolutely spectacular.
Absolutely beautiful.
And this
Absolutely
does look like,
beautiful.
I don't know, parts of the South Island in New Zealand, or places like Scotland and Wales and Ireland and it. And
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I've driven roads and gone up the sides of mountains that look very similar to this, so
I can't
I can
imagine
totally
driving a
buy it.
car from that era on that quality of road. You'd be sliding around a fair bit.
Yeah, and especially if you're these characters that have quite a lot of alcohol in their systems already,
I
they
assume they're
will be
going
quite the
slowly,
task.
because look at that road, man. That's like pretty much dirt and mud and potholes everywhere.
Hopefully, hopefully these guys, like, though they're men's men, though, who knows? Maybe they just
Yeah.
fired up that hill as fast as they could go.
Yeah, so we'll go on to the
Gorgeous
next
though.
one here. So the next scene cuts into Vietnam, where we see that our characters become POWs, prisoners of war, and they're
Oh
not
yeah.
terribly happy. And it's very good
No,
location
no.
shootings here with all the scenery, and that's absolutely stunning. But it's very grim because our guys have become POWs and they're living in pretty horrible conditions.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, and I suppose, look, it helps make it an interesting story, but it's also one of those situations where it's almost so fantastical that you nearly wouldn't believe it could happen, that these three guys could all come across each other again. But the way it's actually
Yeah,
shown to you in the movie, so right, so we cut to Vietnam, we're shown a village that's essentially burning, and we
yeah,
see Robert De Niro's character Mike. He's lying in the grass among lots of like dead bodies, and he's watching a Viet Cong soldier kind of go around killing the last remaining villagers. So when the Viet Cong soldier kind of gets close to him, Mike kind of springs up from where he was hiding among the dead bodies, and he has a flamethrower, and he just kind of lets loose on the guy, and then burns the Viet Cong soldier, and then picks up his rifle and essentially just sprays him with bullets, which is a pretty intense Like, because we went one moment, it's a bunch of guys up the mountains drinking beers, doing a bit of deer
Yeah.
hunting, to all of a sudden you're seeing one of them completely like covered in blood and mud, and he's literally burning a man with a flamethrower and then shooting at his body with a rifle. Like, it really just straight away just chucks you right into this war environment.
Yeah.
So
And there's look, and
literally,
around that same scene, there was some kind of strafing run too, or some small bombs or shelling going on. And
that's right. That's right. There's kind of bombing going on around us. And so Mike, he brutally kills this Viet Cong soldier, and just as he does this, a helicopter lands nearby, and a bunch of Marines jump out. They're obviously coming to kind of survey this village or see what's going on here. But we realize that two of the members of this group are actually Steve and Nick. So all of a sudden, we have the three friends back together. They're united again here in Vietnam. But literally moments into them being reintroduced to each other, there's a big explosion, and we briefly see then a whole kind of field of Viet Cong soldiers surrounding the village. So as soon as the lads have been reunited, they're essentially captured, and as you mentioned, they become POWs, and they're
yeah,
brought to this horrific um, kind of bamboo cottage type of deal that's sitting on the edge of a river, where they're kept essentially in cages that are mostly submerged in
and they're filled with
water,
barbed
and
wire.
filled with barbed wire. You've got rats swimming alongside them. Really, really horrible way to keep prisoners, because essentially you have to keep holding yourself up the whole time you're there, because you'll
Yeah,
drown otherwise. Really, like,
mm,
you're gonna have to stay awake. You're gonna have to like pretty much tie yourself in barbed wire or hang yourself off a piece of bamboo just to stay afloat, so you don't maybe like doze off and drown yourself. Of course, the whole time you're being starved as well, which is brutal. So
and
essentially,
rats trying to
though,
bite on your fingers, and
rats gnawing on your fingers. Oh, it's horrific. It's horrific. And
mm,
believe me, ladies and gentlemen, who are watching or listening to this, if you haven't actually watched this movie, if even if you go just to watch some of the Vietnam scenes, you will see firsthand, like, it's you would your skin would crawl seeing the conditions that these men are forced to
yeah,
endure. And I suppose the big shit carry on top of all of this is, apart from the situation you're being held in, the captors, the Viet Cong soldiers, are forcing these men to play Russian roulette against each other, which is obviously a horrific way to treat prisoners. So essentially,
it's like
the old
entertainment to pass the time.
yeah, the worst this it's a pretty brutal form of entertainment for the jailers here. And it's essentially a case where you've got men who are imprisoned in these floating cages. They're being pulled upstairs one by one and forced to play against each other in these games of Russian roulette. So essentially, you've got Mike, Nick, and Steve all watching and waiting as one by one different soldiers are pulled up, forced to play. Of course, they're all going to die one by one, because in Russian
Yeah,
roulette, there's only so long you can go on for before you are going to
hmm
catch that bullet. Like, it's just mathematically impossible that you're going to live. Like, eventually you will get got. But so it comes down to that there is Mike, Nick, and Stevie are all left together. Everybody else has been shot at this stage. So Mike and Stevie get pulled up to play a game of Russian roulette against each other, and Stevie just can't do it. He's like, Mike, I can't. Like, he's crying, he's wetting himself. He's been completely traumatized. He's been watching people die, and he just can't do it. He can't go through it. And Mike's like, look, you have to do it. You have to do it. They're going to kill you anyway. Just do it. Just do it. But in the end, he can't do it, and Stevie actually ends up firing his gun into the roof instead of pointing it at his own head. So the Viet Cong officers get extremely angry at this, that he's not willing to cooperate. So they drag him out and put him in an even worse cage than the one he's already been in, that has literally no space for him to move around. The water goes right up to your chin. So essentially, if you let go of the bars at all, you're gonna drown. And he also has like rats crawling across his face. So they really, really literally leave him out to die because he won't cooperate and play Russian roulette. So now it comes down that only Mike and Nick are available to play. So they hatch this plan where Mike tells Nick that he wants to convince the guards to play with 3 bullets in the gun
Yes.
instead of just one. So I suppose from the guards' point of view, the demo will just look like a high stakes game, and they'll be able to gamble some big money on the chances of one of these guys, because they've just increased the chances now because we've got 3 bullets in the chamber. But the way Mike is reasoning it is, look, if there's 3 bullets in that gun, when you take your turn and it goes click, if you survive, that the next chamber has a bullet in it. So that's one shot. You'll have, and then you'll know the next one's empty. But then there's another shot, and then the next one's empty, and then there's another shot. So he has it worked out in their mind. So in his mind. So Mike and Nick, they're forced to play off against each other, and Mike convinces the guards to do the thing with the 3 bullets. And he's trying to explain to them. He's like, 3, 1, 2, 3, because obviously they don't speak English, and he's trying to explain to them what he wants them to do. And he convinces them to go along with it, and they put in the 3 bullets, and they place the pistol on the table, and they spin it round, and it points to Mike, and they all start laughing. The captives all start laughing, and Mike starts laughing, because they're obviously all kind of thinking, well, here you go, dickhead. You asked for 3 bullets, and now you've rolled the dice, and it's your turn, so you're going to have to see if this happens. So he lifts the gun, and you think he's going to go for just to go along with it, but I'm trying to remember. He might click it once, but he moves so fast anyway that he has the gun to his head. He pulls down the rifle of the nearest guard who's kind of beside him and shoots him point blank. Then you hear a click. Then he shoots the other guard point blank. You hear the other click, and he shoots the other guard point blank. So you hear he got his 3 shots off, killed the 3 guards. In the meantime, Nick has also disarmed one of the other guards and has let rip with the machine gun. So they manage in essentially like under a minute to kill all the Viet Cong guards, and they're able to escape and drag Stevie out of the cage. But that whole scene, man, I like the way I've just described it. Really, really does not do it justice. I would implore anybody, even if you don't intend on ever watching this movie fully, or watching it all, or don't have time to watch it or whatever, at the very least, go on to YouTube and watch this whole scene, because literally everything that happens in it is so monumentally intense. Like when
it
you
is.
watch this scene, you're literally just like on the edge of your seat watching the scene, especially like the first time you see it, because you're like, how are these guys going to get out of this situation that
We don't know
they've
that they
found
will. We've
themselves?
got no idea.
And it's brutal. It's brutal. Well, what did you think of this whole scene?
I love it. Just the tension of it just ratchets right up. And like the first time you see it, you don't know who's going to live and die. I mean, you might guess that De Niro lives, but I mean, this was the 70s. He's not the De Niro we know from the 80s and 90s. There's no guarantee. He might have died in it and might have carried on some other characters. You don't know one way or another until you watch it.
It's really hardcore, and of course, it's nearly the type of thing traditionally you'd expect to be a finale of a movie, because
Yeah,
it's so monumentally kind of frightening, and such a horrific situation to be in. You think that from escaping that would nearly be the climax of a story, but in this movie, things nearly just go from bad to worse. So the 3 guys, they've killed the guards, but they're stuck now along this river, and they're
yeah. They get
essentially
into the river
floating
and
on a
float
log.
along.
And unfortunately, they first of all they come across a bridge that they're able to latch onto, and an American chopper happens to be hovering across. So they try to pick them up from the water, but only
Yeah,
Nick
unsuccessfully.
is very unsuccessfully. Yeah, and it's only actually Nick, who's Christopher Walken's character, that manages to successfully board the chopper, and Mike and Stevie end up falling as they're gripping on because they can't hold on, which is understandable considering they've spent most of the last couple of weeks in a floating prison.
Yeah,
Essentially, I'm sure their muscles are just like nothing at this stage. But
yeah. And they
so poor
float
Nick.
along the rivers, how they kind of make their escape. And
That's right. That's right. They float along. Eventually, we learn that Stevie's leg is badly broken. I think both his legs, you
yeah,
see
he
that his
gets shot
bones
during
are
the
actually,
getting
yeah, and
away.
he's got a bone like protruding through one of his legs. It's a really horrific looking injury. But yeah, like you said, they kind of get dragged along by the current, and Mike eventually is able to drag Nick to land, and he eventually comes across a convoy of mixed American and Vietnamese forces that he's able to kind of load Stevie onto a jeep so they can take him off for treatment. And as far as he knows, he'll never see him again. He's
Mm.
not sure what's going to happen to him. And
And then
we also see
that,
here the final frame you have here in this shot. You see all the bodies lined up. That's from
yeah,
when Nick is brought to the American hospital, and in the Nam, he's sitting on the window watching all these body bags being loaded into metal coffins while experiencing severe PTSD. So yeah, it's quite the harrowing scenes unfolding here.
yeah, it is. And the background also around this time was like the fall of Saigon, and there's all sorts of displaced villages and troops going here and there, and just utter chaos going on all around.
And it's yeah, you can see poor Nick, like he's clearly going through a lot. Like he's, as far as he knows, his two friends are dead because the last time he saw them, they were falling from the helicopter while he was getting rescued. And we also have now a situation where he's sitting in this hospital, he's watching amputees and other people who've suffered like horrendous injuries being carted in and treated all around him. And he's just essentially, a mess. A doctor
Yeah,
approaches him trying to get him to fill out a form, and they're asking him all these. To be honest with you, man, they're asking him all these questions that anybody who's been through any type of medical trauma would just not be in a position to answer. Like the doctors there
no,
trying to, oh, can you tell me your mother's maiden name and her date of birth and your next of kin and all this stuff, and you can just see he's totally tearing up and crying, and he
hmm
can't cope with everything that's going on, and he's looking in his wallet, and he's looking at the photo of Meryl Streep, and it's just kind of tearing him apart. This He's in this his situation, and you can just see it's breaking him up inside. And we he gets discharged from the hospital eventually, and he goes to, I suppose, what you could like, this telecommunications center where they allow all the Marines to phone home and phone back to the States to their family members. And he goes to make a call home, and just as the operator picks up for him to be connected on the call, he hangs up the phone and walks out because he can't face the prospect of telling anybody at home what's been happening and what's happened to Mike and Stevie. And he ends up leaving the American Forces Center and just setting off on the streets of Saigon, where he, essentially just goes on the lash, gets drunk, is frequenting,
yep,
skin bars, goes into this one particular bar. You've got like prostitutes there. One of them convinces him to go upstairs for a shag, but just as they're about to get busy, there's like a baby in the room that starts crying, and he can't handle just everything that's going
hmm
on. Obviously, because there's like a child there, so he runs out of the place, and he's wandering through the streets of Saigon, and he's kind of standing on a street corner, and next thing he hears a gunshot, And he's like, "What the fuck is that?" So he goes and looks around the corner, and he hears another gunshot. So he goes a bit closer, and there's a building with a kind of fancy sports car sitting outside it, and there's a Frenchman sitting in the car, and he's drinking champagne. You get the impression he's very wealthy and well to
Yeah,
do. And Nick essentially asks him, what's with the gunshots, what's going on in there, and the Frenchman explains to him that it's games of Russian roulette, that people play Russian roulette for money in Saigon, and you'd have to pay a high fee to enter, but it's something that you can do, recreationally, if that's what you so desire. You can make a lot of money by playing this. So Nick is totally disgusted at the whole idea of this, and he actually walks into the room where two people are in the middle of playing a game of Russian roulette, and he actually grabs the gun off one of the people and fires it off, canceling the game, obviously. And this causes like a big kind of hullabaloo, and the place gets cleared out, and everybody obviously wants to beat the shit out of Christopher Walken because he's after ruining their game of Russian roulette. So he ends up escaping and driving off with the Frenchman in a sports car. And we also see during this scene that in the same Russian roulette kind of building that all this is going on in, that Robert De Niro's character, was actually there the whole time. And he actually had seen Nick from across the room, but wasn't able to get
yeah,
over to him in time before all
mm,
the hullabaloo kicked off. So it's another kind of sad moment where the two friends almost had a chance to reunite, but due to circumstances, it doesn't end up happening. So for the moment, the last we see of Nick is him flying off in the car with the French guy, while Mike is kind of left to return home to the States and face his family and friends.
yeah. And Mike comes home to a welcome home party, but doesn't go to it. And said he's depressed and traumatized from all the events, and just stays in the hotel. And he's going around the town seeing the friends, families, all the locals, and they're all glad to see him. But he's dressed in his nice uniform here, and it's good to have him back. But they've got no context that he's come back from this world of madness and being tortured and being a prisoner, and all of that's going on in his mind, while he's got to keep up appearances and act like he's the same person he was before, and he's not that person anymore.
I think as well, excuse me, I think that the fact that he's dressed in his full kind of military finery, it definitely makes you think about the Green Beret guy that they spoke
Yeah, the
to
guy in the
earlier
bar.
in the movie, because he's kind of almost become that guy now. He's seen
Even
the
the way they
same shit.
in the shots, like framed same kind of way with.
Yeah, and it's like, now he knows
Mm,
what that guy meant when he said fuck it. Like he's seen the other side now. And
yeah,
it's, even though we're not seeing these intense Vietnam scenes that we just saw a few moments ago, there's a different type of intensity there. Because I myself, especially when I was rewatching this recently, it was almost the scenes of Mike coming home that were nearly the most tough to deal with, because
yeah,
you do really feel for him. He's like the odd one out now, because the friends that stayed behind, like, they don't know anything of what he's just experienced. And the only people who do know anything, he doesn't even know whether they're alive or dead, or if they're ever going to be coming
mm,
home again. So he's just
yeah.
kind of
And his
stuck
other
almost
mates
in
with him
limbo.
are worse off than he is.
Exactly. Exactly. And we also, I suppose, see a little bit of I suppose, the romantic side, or the romantic relationship blossoming between Mike and Meryl Streep's character, because she had kind of, I suppose, she was involved with Nick, but obviously Mike kind of fancied her, and there is a little bit
Yeah,
of that kind of going on as well, which he also feels bad about, because she was his best friend's girl, for want of a better term, and he probably
yeah,
feels guilty about anything going on, which is kind of clear as well, because they go to get a motel together, and she's pretty gamey for doing the deed, but when she comes out, I think all he wants to do is really just go to sleep and
Yeah.
try and get through the night. So there's a lot going on for poor Mike once he gets home, and it's nearly as difficult a struggle for him just to kind of exist at home as it was to fight in the war.
Yeah, it's coming back to, you know, the country town and all the mundane, ordinary life things. He's just sort of walking through it. Like, you know, he's got the shops, see the work in the background, the bars, the people he knows, and here at the bowling alley, and they go hunting again. But all the things that were normal or enjoyable before are now just like not the same. Like everything's just, you know, kind of a mess.
Yeah, and so much to the point that when he goes and goes off solo to do his hunt, away from the rest of them while they stay back at the cabin, he has the deer in his sights, and he can't take the shot. He can't do it. He can't just end the life now because he's changed now, and he has the deer in his sights, and he still fires off a shot, but he fires off a shot more as a warning to the deer, to get the fuck out of there, because he doesn't want to kill it. And then after the deer is kind of scarpered, he tracks it for a bit more and just watches it for a while, and watches the deer just interacting with its own environment and listening to the wind blow through the trees. And you just kind of get this sense that he's a changed man. Like, he really isn't the same man who he was before he left and went off to war. And we also kind of see a triggering moment, because when he comes back to camp, um, Axel and Stanley are having a bit of an argument, and Stanley pulls out his little snub-nosed pistol, and he's kind of waving it in Axel's face. It's like, "Oh, you better take back what you said, or I'll shoot you." And Mike just happens to walk into the room just to see one of his friends pointing a gun at another one of his friends, which totally fucking like triggers him. He kicks off.
Yeah,
He grabs the gun off of Stanley. He actually puts a round in the chamber and spins it round and places it to his temple and pulls the trigger, but it's an empty chamber. So he's clearly kind of in that moment, he's almost cracked, and he was nearly ready to Russian roulette his own mate. So you can tell there's still a lot going on with him. And it's around this time he also learns that Phoebe has actually been back home in America. He actually made it back from the war, but the only thing is he's not living at home in his own house. He finds out from his wife Angela that he's in this kind of veterans hospital,
yeah,
and he goes to visit him,
and
and this in
bingo.
itself, bingo. Now this is one of those things, and once again, not a military veteran, I can't speak to any type of the real life context to which these things unfold in, but my God, like the situation in this hospital, once again, it just really hits you. It just kind of hits you right in the heart, because even when he's talking to Stevie on the phone before he comes to visit him, you keep on hearing this whining sound, like this kind of machinery sound. And Mike keeps asking Stevie, like, "What's that sound in the background I keep hearing?" And Stevie's like, "Oh, it's wheelchairs, it's wheelchairs." And Mike doesn't understand that the guy he's talking on the phone is surrounded by people who are all on these electric wheelchairs, and he himself is on an electric wheelchair because he no longer has the use of his legs. And it's just really tough. Like, and he goes to actually visit Stevie, and Stevie, he doesn't want to go home. He can't go back to his wife and kid. He says he doesn't fit in. He doesn't want to be a burden on them because he's in a wheelchair, and he's trying to convince Mike that he actually is happy in the hospital, and they get to play bingo and they get to do all this stuff. But Mike knows, like, it's bullshit. Like, he's not happy at all. Like, he's just
Yeah,
living in misery in this hospital. But what's I suppose most important about this entire interaction with Mike and Stevie in the hospital is Mike comes to the conclusion Nick is still alive, and the reason he comes to this conclusion is because Stevie mentions to him that every month he gets sent a package of money from Saigon,
Yeah,
and when we shows Mike this drawer full of money he has, and it's all like rolls and rolls of like $100 bills and stuff, and you know, Mike kind of comes to the conclusion, oh, look, it must be Nick, like he's still alive. It has to be him sending you the money, like he must be still alive. And Stevie's kind of asking, like, well, how could he be making so much money? Like, because he's sending me like thousands of dollars every month, and you can tell Mike kind of has an inkling as to how he's doing it, but he doesn't want to say it to him. So he just says, oh, he's probably just playing cards or something. I'm, professional
hmm
gambling or whatever. So Mike's like, fuck this, Stevie, you're going home. He pretty much forces him out of the hospital and brings him back home to his wife and kid. And then he decides he's going back to Nam, he's going to Saigon, and he's going to bring Nikki home.
Yeah, which leads us on to the next scenes. And before we get there, it's got a couple of close-up ones that when he first comes back to the town, we see the welcome home Michael, and the way he's like framed, it's kind of over his shoulder, but he's almost not even in the shot, and it shows he's kind of like holding back. He doesn't want to participate or be involved in any of this. There's nothing to celebrate for him. And goes into the next scenes. This is just a nice, good shot here. This is during the slight fall of Saigon, where they're trying to evacuate people, and there's just vehicles and people going in every which way, but loose all over the place. Like you said, the De Niro's character goes back to Vietnam to try and find his other mate, but he finds more craziness.
Oh yeah, and we're entering the kind of the final tragic act of the movie here, and so Mike, yeah, he returns to Vietnam. He goes to Saigon to go and find Nick, and as you mentioned, yeah, there's just these scenes of absolute chaos because this is essentially during the fall of Saigon, so everybody's just trying to get the fuck out of there. The city is gone to chaos. We actually see some interesting scenes of Michael wandering through the city at night, and we actually see a
Yeah.
lot of the same streets that Nick had gone through earlier on in the movie, except now we're seeing them all blown up and on fire, and he
Mhm.
even goes into the same kind of skin bar that Nicky had been in, and it's all like half wrecked, and they're only serving drinks by candlelight, and the same prostitute is still there, and like it's all just very kind of, you can tell that the whole place is just crumbling down around everybody. But Michael, he walks his way through the street, and he comes across the sports car that we saw earlier in the movie, the fancy
Yes.
sports car with the Frenchman that sits outside the building where they play Russian roulette. So Michael, he obviously remembers this guy from seeing him before in Saigon previously and knows he's involved with the Russian roulette game. He also knows that he saw Nicky run off with him the very last time he saw him alive. So, he concludes that this guy knows Nicky and knows where he is. So the Frenchman, he's initially quite uncooperative with him. He doesn't want to help him out. He doesn't want to tell him anything. But eventually, largely thanks to a bribe, he brings Michael to the place where they're playing Russian roulette, and Michael realizes that Nick's going to be one of the participants in the game, and apparently he's known locally as the famous American because of his unbelievable lucky streak he has playing Russian roulette. Because at this point he's been like surviving, like for a couple of years playing the games all the time, and he's never shot himself. Each round
Mm.
it's reset, and he always survives. And this whole time he's addicted to heroin, but he's also been accumulating tons and tons and tons of money, which is why he has all this money to send back home to Stevie in the hospital. So you kind of have this situation where he's totally addicted to heroin. He nearly doesn't even know himself anymore. Mike tries to pull him aside when he sees him kind of in the backstage area of the Russian roulette place, and he's like, "It's me, it's Mike. Don't you recognize me?" And you can just Nick just doesn't know who he is, or he doesn't seem to know who he is. He spits in his face because he just wants him to get out of his way. All he's interested in is going to the table and playing his game of Russian roulette. He doesn't even want to speak to him or acknowledge him. So Mike, kind of in a complete panic, he grabs the Frenchman and he demands that he take him to the bosses who run the Russian roulette kind of syndicate. So they go into this room kind of in the back of the building, and he hands over like $5,000 to the guys to actually enter himself in the game of Russian roulette. So the guys accept his offer, and Mike is brought out, and he's taken the place of the other guy that Nick was originally going to be matched up against. So here we have the two friends once again face to face in a game of Russian roulette, except this time we're in this crazy scenario where like nobody's being forced to play. Nick is playing out of choice because he's completely addicted to drugs, and he's also kind of gone off his rocker, for want of a better term. And Michael's playing because he's really just attempting to save his friend, and he realizes this could be like a last ditch opportunity to talk some sense into him and bring him round. And what
Good luck.
unfolds is it's so tragic, this scene, because there's numerous instances, like, because Mike, he does take his turn like a man, and he puts the gun to his head, click, doesn't go off. Nick takes his turn, click, it doesn't go off. And the whole time this is going on, Mike is trying to remind him. He's like, remember what we used to do, and and finally, yeah, and it's the hunting thing though that finally gets a flicker of recognition, because he's like, you remember the trees, you remember how you used to like how the wind moves through the trees, and in that moment, Nick's like, yes, I remember. And he also remembers one shot. He says that to him, one shot, and he smiles. And Michael's like, that's right, one shot, because he thinks finally he remembers, finally I've gotten through to him. And in that very moment, he literally lifts the gun to his head, pulls the trigger, live round, and he's dead. And it's such a sad moment. And Mike crumbles to the ground. He's bawling, crying. He's holding Nicky in his hand as the blood is just kind of pouring out of his head. And it's just so horrific that he finally got back in front of his friend, and then had to watch him die right in front of his eyes. He couldn't save him.
Apparently they did that in one take as well.
Tragedy. That's right.
Like
That's right. And I suppose before we do kind of move on to the next final bit of the movie, I should mention, before it goes out of my mind, this French fella who was kind of a sports car guy, and who had kind of gotten the lads in on the whole Russian roulette game. Do you know anything about him in real life?
No, I have no idea.
I can't remember his name. I'll try and find it for you after the show. But
I can bring it up. I think I've got the cast on here.
This guy, a lot of the Russian roulette stuff in this movie apparently comes from this French guy, because apparently he was in like the French armed forces, who were also involved in Vietnam. And him and his friend in real life were captured and forced to play Russian roulette, and his friend actually died playing Russian roulette. So it's crazy that this guy, who in the movie storyline is kind of this evil guy who seems to be facilitating all this, in real life was actually a victim of the very kind of same practice. I think him and his friend were like captured in, like, I don't know where they were captured, somewhere, and they were forced to do this. So I think once Michael Cimino got speaking to him and realized that he had some like real life experience being in a situation like this, he got to know him and got to like him, and actually found a way to write him in as a character in the movie.
So I'm just looking at the cast, and I'm going to assume it's this guy because it's the only French name that lists in the cast. Is it Pierre Segui?
Character's name, yeah, the character's name is Julian, I think. That's the name of the French character.
That's the actor I'm looking at there. Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's just so it's just so tragic. The whole thing is just so tragic. And just want to take a moment as well to take in the entire environment of the actual Russian roulette room, because it's filled with all these businessmen, guys in suits, guys smoking cigarettes, waving money around. It's just this really intense atmosphere, and it's really kind of unnerving in a lot of ways to think that you have
It's
this like
crazy.
large group
It's
of
crazy.
people. Oh, it's like, and like you're literally gambling on life and death, and you're
Yeah,
you're
and amongst the
witnessing.
war going on in the background and other chaos and stuff, it's just
It's just
a microcosm of
madness.
the macrocosm, all the bizarre chaos going on.
Look, Mike, he stays true to his word, and he does end up bringing Nikki's body home,
Yeah,
and
brings them home.
we get the funeral service, and also a very kind of poignant moment after the funeral where all the surviving friends, including Stevie, who's now out of the hospital, and the rest of the crew, they all share a moment, and they sing "God Save America" around the table there in the bar, and it's just a very kind of yeah, a very poignant moment, and just a pin on top of what had been a very tragic story. And of course, in that classic, if you ever want to just make sure to bring your audience to tears after a tragic event, the best way to do it is to then roll the credits showing pictures of everybody being really happy and smiley
Yeah.
prior to all the awful things that happens while the sad music plays. It just really pulls at the heartstrings. Because the very, very final shot is the one you have so expertly captured here. They do a kind of freeze frame of the wedding dance, and because it is kind of
Yeah,
the
the old
last
freeze
moment in the
frame.
movie, everybody's happy, everybody's celebrating, and everybody's still alive, most importantly. And
Hmm. We didn't do a break
and
in today's show, but I had this in there in case we did, so it's just a blow up of that end
we
scene
we
there, so you
we
can
we
see it
thought
better.
we nearly had to do like a crying break,
Serving
which
God
was
and country proudly, it says in the background. Yeah.
yeah, it's a brilliant shot, and it's actually funny enough. I mentioned there about being a bit cryy or a bit teary eyed. It
Yeah.
was one of those movies, especially as I got a bit older and I'd rewatch it. It would pull at my heartstrings quite a lot, because even though, like I've mentioned multiple times now, like I can't relate to fighting in a war or anything like that, but I can relate to
Mhm.
like being in a close knit group of friends and knowing what it would be like when someone close to you is killed or tragedies happen. And
Mhm.
there's just a lot of just real emotion and real life connections. I think nearly anybody, especially a man, I think watching this movie, they'd be hard pressed to not find something that you could kind of latch on to and say, you know what, I kind
Yeah.
of maybe have lived a little bit like that in real life. Also, as
And it
well,
is
I
a
think
mm,
I was just going to mention John Cazale here. His last ever movie, he died from cancer afterwards,
yeah, which they
and
knew during the making of the film that was basically going to happen.
yeah, sad. But he's a great actor. He's a great actor, and it's for someone who didn't have too many years in the business, he definitely made his mark, because he's in Deer Hunter, he's in Dog Day Afternoon, he's in Godfather One
Yeah.
and Two. Like that's a hell of a run of movies to have
Yeah, that's
in
good.
such a short space of time.
Yeah, I do like this film too. It's a real contrast. Like I mean, it's really a character piece. The war's kind of the background, and we see the emotional realism of what happens to De Niro's character and his friends and the aftermath. But it's the beginning of some of what you call anti-war films, or showing some of the real effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, which wasn't really known about so much back then. And it's a real contrast to previous decades of other Hollywood films about the war, which were, I mean, the earliest ones, of course, were basically propaganda and pro-war, but then a lot of them films I like to watch, are pretty much men on a mission, or it's about the battle or the scene. It's not about the home life or the family or the aftermath of losing limbs and being traumatized. So it does lead into those other films like, your Oliver Stone's Platoon and Apocalypse Now, and showing more the horrors of the war rather than, we went over and fought and did whatever. It's, it's about the realities of it and the aftermath.
Yeah, it's and the relationships with people
Yeah.
and what can happen to these relationships when they're put under incredible strain.
I mean, so many Vietnam veterans ended up homeless or drug addicts or became suicidal when they tried to reintegrate back into society.
That's right, and it's something, I suppose, they almost make a fair point of it in this movie, because in the opening scenes when everybody's preparing for the wedding, a lot of the men you see helping out with getting the hall ready, they're like supposed to be like World War II veterans, and there's definitely a real contrast in how they're treated by society compared to the Vietnam vets,
Yes.
because the World War II guys, they almost become these kind of like pillars of society where the
Yeah.
community kind of rally around them
Well,
and
they
make them
spit on a
these
lot of
kind of
the
pinnacle
vets when they
figures.
parade. People would spit on them, and there were protests and all sorts of horrible treatment, which is fairly disgusting.
Oh,
I get
the
people can be
Vietnam
against
vets.
war, but it's disgusting to do that to someone who's actually been war and come back.
Yeah, no, look, John Rambo's rant at the end of First Blood was there was a
We
lot
might
of
have to talk
truth
about
in
that
that
in a month
rant.
or so.
Yeah, we might have to. We might have to.
We'll have a break with some lighter stuff in between, are they?
Yeah, we took a bit of a turn this week, folks. But look, from time to time, I suppose it's good to give the soul a bit of a rinse and get into
Yep.
the more nitty gritty stuff, because that's the beauty of cinema as well. You're not just, it's not all popcorn entertainment all the time. You are
No.
gonna find these pieces that kind of cause you to have some real deep emotional thought and reflection on your own life.
Yeah, it's to me, it's very deep and meaningful film, and it's my favorite decade of American cinema, the 70s films, where there were so many good sort of new wave directors and interesting stories that are a contrast to the other decades. And I love cinema going back 100 years, but American 70s films are some of my all-time favorite films. There's just so much great stuff made then.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to drop into this decade again in the future.
Okay, well, we'll finish up there, and as we go out, I'm just going to play a little musical interlude to sort of cheer us up and soothe away some of the darker elements. So, fuck it, dude. Let's go bowling.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
See ya.